Hello again, everyone. Continuing with Minnesota week, I'm going to be talking about the Vikings, so the NFL team that's in Minnesota. Last year, the Vikings had a 7-9 record, so they missed out on the playoffs. Obviously, playing in the NFC North, they play against the Packers and the Lions. So two pretty strong teams there with their records last season, as well as the Bears, who are never a team you can underestimate for sure, kind of thing. So they play in a tough division with the Packers and the Lions, and again with the Bears. So 7-9 record is still respectable. Almost a 500 season. That's not horrible, kind of thing. They do have the 11th overall pick, so they can do some things with that. I'll talk about that situation first. Looking at that 11th overall pick and kind of where the team needs to improve, I think they're going to either draft a offensive lineman or a cornerback. Now, speaking with the cornerback, I think the top 10 teams, I think all the picks that are going to happen there are either going to be quarterbacks, wide receivers, or defensive linemen. So I think essentially the Vikings are going to have their pick of any cornerback that would be available, because I don't think any will have been taken yet. So they might decide to take a cornerback there. They also do have the 45th overall pick, and the cornerback field is a lot deeper than the offensive lineman field, I feel. So they might be able to find a very solid cornerback with their second round pick and decide to go with an offensive lineman in their 11th overall pick with either Lyle Collins or Eric Flowers. I think would be one of the two picks that they would take for offensive linemen there. So it's a solid pick. It's a high pick. Obviously, just out of the top 10. So that's what I think they'll do with that. It's definitely either going to be an offensive tackle or a cornerback. I would say running back is another one of their team needs, but they did re-sign Matt Asiata, so I don't think they'll be drafting a running back, especially not with the 11th overall pick. You don't see running backs drafted very high that more. Rarely are running backs drafted in the first round, at least in the last few years. That's been the trend, is they're usually taken in the second round, is where the first running backs are picked. This year you might see one or two taking the first round kind of thing, but it's again not a position that teams are comfortable using their first round pick on, I want to say, unless their run game is horrible and they haven't been able to find anything. And also, it is still 5 to 6 weeks until the draft, so teams are going to have free agency players still that are going to be available. Teams are going to be looking to cut salary cap space, so there could be solid players that become available. So the Vikings could always try to pick up one of those players for sure as well. They definitely need to improve, I think, more on the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball, which is odd for me to say, because I think a lot of teams usually struggle on defense, and that's why they have non-winning seasons like the Vikings did. But when you look at their defensive stats from last season, they were 11th in against points. They were 21.4 points per game, 14th in yards, 344, 7th against the pass in 223, and 25 in the rush at 121. So yes, their rush defense is definitely where they would need to improve, kind of thing. But they were 7th against the pass, so clearly their DBs are doing a good job there, and 14th in yards, so they're in the top half in yards. So that's why I see their first round pick being more offensive lineman related than cornerback related. But we'll see what happens again with that. But I think their offense is definitely where they need to improve more. Looking at their offense, they were 20th in the league in points, 20.3, 27th in yards at 315.5, 28th in the pass at just over 200 yards, and 14th in the rush at 112.8. So that's why I also don't see them drafting a running back with their first round pick. It's because Matt Asiata can get the job done. He had 570 yards for 164 carries and 9 touchdowns, and then he also had 44 receptions for 312 yards and a touchdown with that as well. So he's a dual threat running back. He's a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and a guy that can run the ball for you as well, kind of thing as well. Only 164 carries, so he was only averaging maybe 10, 11 carries a game kind of thing, which is fine. That's not that bad. If you have another running back that's doing another 10 to 12, it just means that your quarterback is going to have to be more pass heavy, and Teddy Bridgewater was 259 of 402 attempts for just over 2,900 yards, and he had 14 touchdowns and 12 picks. So for a rookie, those aren't horrible stats. But when you see your main running back, only having 164 carries, and then your quarterback's only had 400 pass attempts, your offense isn't on the field enough. First of all, I don't think. And Bridgewater might be not having enough time in the pocket to get the ball out, and that kind of stuff. So that's why I think they're going to draft an offensive lineman with their pick, just to give Teddy Bridgewater some more time, to get more comfortable, get some more time in the pocket. So maybe you won't have to scramble as much and that kind of thing. They did trade and picked up Mike Wallace, so he's got another weapon wide receiver there. He's got Greg Jennings, who last year had 59 receptions and 742 yards with 6 touchdowns. He also had a couple young receivers in Wright and Johnson, who had 42 receptions and 31 receptions respectively, and combined for 4 touchdowns between the two guys, and just about 1,000 yards between those two guys as well. So that's solid. And then he also has Patterson, who's another young receiver who had 33 receptions and 384 yards. Like I said, with Matt Asiata, 164 carries for 570 yards. They also have McKinnon, who was just a second-year player this last year, at 113 carries for 538 yards. So they're splitting the workload between those two fairly evenly. So between those two, you had an 1,100-yard rusher kind of thing in a season, which is fine. That's solid. So that's good. It helps to have running backs who can take a little bit of the workload off of Bridgewater's shoulders. I'm not sure if Bridgewater is necessarily the answer at quarterback for the Vikings either. So we might also see maybe in the second or third round pick, maybe they draft a quarterback. I know it would kind of be really testy, and would probably have a lot of heat in Minnesota with drafting another quarterback in a top 3 round kind of thing with Teddy Bridgewater now there. But 14 touchdowns at 12 picks, that's not great. He didn't even get to 3,000 yards. But how much of the failure on offense is his fault? How much of it is the offensive coordinator's fault? How much is it of him not having the wide receiver weapons to get the ball to? There's so many excuses, which I know NFL teams don't like to use, on why Bridgewater might not have had as great a success as he could have in his first year. He also was drafted to not a great team to begin with the Vikings, which usually happens when you are a quarterback and drafted high. It's probably because you're getting drafted by not a great team, and that kind of thing. I mean, Aaron Rodgers lucked out with Green Bay when he was drafted, because he could watch far for a couple of years, and then the team was able to develop, kind of thing. With Bridgewater, he's kind of, here you go, and hopefully we can make it work, kind of thing. So now that he's had a year under his belt, I do think the Vikings will improve, especially if they can draft an lineman that can give them some more time. Their defense is solid as well. Brinkley had 53 tackles, 21 assists for 1 sack and 1 forced fumble, that kind of thing. Free safety Smith, he had 71 tackles and 21 assists with 3 sacks. So even your free safeties are getting to the quarterback, which is nice to have for sure. Barr, their outside linebacker, had 55 tackles with 15 assists and 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So that's solid as well. And then their strong safety, Robert Blanton, had 72 tackles and 34 assists. So the unfortunate thing with that, is that your free safeties and strong safeties are leading the teams in tackles. And like I've said in previous posts, if your cornerbacks and your defensive backs are leading your team in tackles, it means that running backs and wide receivers are getting to the second level way too frequently. Ideally, somebody on your team who leads your team in tackles is going to be like an outside linebacker or maybe a defensive end kind of thing. Not going to be a cornerback or a free safety. That just means way too many players are getting to the second level, second and third level, and that just can't happen, for sure. Chad Greenway, a solid outside linebacker. He had 56 tackles, 37 assists with 1 sack and 1 forced fumble. So he's doing his job. And like I said, Barr had 55 tackles and 15 assists with 4 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. So that's good as well. But between these players, they've combined for just 9 sacks between those players that I've mentioned. Obviously, the team as a whole had more than 9 sacks on the season, but those are the guys that are leading your team in tackles, so they need to also find a way to get to the quarterback. So hopefully they can do that with the draft. Maybe they can find stuff in free agency. When teams get into their preseason, you're going to see teams cut players who are going to be who still have something left in the tank and will be picked up by other teams. And teams who struggle are usually going to be the teams that can pick up those players, because if you get cut by a contending team, another contending team probably isn't going to sign you. But if you still want to play, then that's when you're going to go to teams who struggle and still need players. And the Vikings would kind of be a team where you're not going to the worst team in the league. It's not like you're been cut by the Patriots and you're going to go play for the Bucks. You're going to a team that is in the middle of the pack, plays in a tough division. You're going to have some tough opponents, but can still compete. And they went 7-9 last year, so we'll see what happens to them this year. again, the Lions now aren't the Lions they used to be. They don't have Sue. They don't have the defensive line that has made them so competitive and led the league against the rest last year. So you got to play them twice this season, and now maybe you can run the ball a little easier against them. The Packers are always going to be a tough team. I think with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, it puts a lot of pressure on the defense to get to him, and he always finds ways to get to his receivers and have an impact. So that'll be tricky, but I definitely think now the Lions aren't as difficult as opponent as they used to be, and I think the Bears are an opponent that they can compete with on a level playing field kind of thing. So when you look at the six games you got to play against your division, I could easily see them going 4-2, maybe an upset win over the Packers, going 5-1 kind of thing within their own division, and that could easily get them a solid playoff spot kind of thing. So we'll see what happens to them this upcoming season. So good luck to the Vikings this upcoming season as well. Hopefully Teddy Bridgewater can continue to grow and improve your offense, and your defense can continue to find ways to get to the quarterback, and just in general your team finds ways to improve, and you'll be able to be a playoff contending team in the near future and have a plus 500 record this upcoming year. Thanks again to all who watched, and I will talk to you tomorrow about the Minnesota Timberwolves of the NBA.